In this video, we're going to take a look at angles. So our last lesson material was on points, lines, and planes. Now we're going to take a look at what happens when I combine two rays together and I get an angle. So we're going to talk about some different terminology. I'm going to work through this Ixl with you just a little bit so you can kind of figure out how to solve some of these problems. This should be a pretty easy Ixl, but I do want you to kind of learn a bit about angles. We're going to find angles throughout the rest of geometry, so it is really important that we get our angles down and get our naming down so that way when we get into geometry later on, we're ready to go. So let's take a look at this first problem. Notice we have an angle here, and they ask for what the vertex is. So when we're dealing with angles, we have two rays. Two rays make up an angle, and where the two rays meet, that is our vertex. Our vertex here is just going to be V. All right, so I'm going to ask a couple different vertex problems. That should be pretty easy. All right. Now, another thing they're going to ask you to do is they're going to ask you to name an angle. Now, the simplest name we have for angles is to use the little angle sign here and then to use the vertex. Now, this doesn't work for all angles. We'll talk about that down the road, but this is the simplest way for us to name an angle, and it should work just fine for this Ixl. We're going to do an angle, and then we're going to use our vertex there as our solution. All right? Another type of problem I might ask is, what are the different sides of the angle? So in this case, we've got two rays, so both of these answers should be rays, right? And then we're going to do the rays where we always do our vertex first. So we get x, oops, sorry about that, x, w would be my ray there. And over here I should get x, y. Notice both of them starting with x, xw and xy. Both of those are my two sides. All right, so a lot of this Ixl should be pretty easy. Here's another name the angle. Now let's get to some harder problems. All right, so one of the types of problems on this Ixl is going to ask you if points are on the interior, exterior, or neither, and they look something like this. Does S lie on the interior, exterior of angle STU? So let me kind of teach you how to do this. If it's on the interior of the angle, you can think of any of this area right here. So any of this area, okay? That was real lovely, purple and blue there. Any of that area is on the interior of the angle. Anything, here let's use blue, anything in the blue area is interior, anything in the exterior, so anything out here, notice the little curved line tells me interior versus exterior, anything out there is going to be exterior, anything that sits on the actual angle is neither, it's going to be neither interior nor exterior. So if I'm looking at point V here, this is on the exterior of my angle. If I'm looking at point S though, notice it asks where does point S lie? Point S actually is on my angle, so that's going to be neither. So those are pretty easy questions once you get the hang of it. The last thing we need to talk about is the three different ways that we name angles. So once again, we're going to use our angle sign on each of these. All right, now there are three ways to name the angle. The first way is to name it with the actual letter like we did before, angle Q. Okay, now there's two other ways, and both of these use three letters. So our options are either one letter, the vertex, or three letters. So in this case, SQR. Notice how Q, oops, didn't mean to put another angle sign in there. Notice how Q is in the middle. And I could do one more, RQS. Notice once again that Q is in the middle, and here's the reason why. If I trace this, let's start at S to Q to R. Notice how that makes my angle. What if I rearrange the letters? What if I went RSQ? Well, R to S to Q. Notice how when I trace that, that actually makes this angle here. So whenever we use three letters, we need to make sure that the angle Q is in the middle. So let's just double check that to make sure our answer is correct. So we end up very good. All right, this is an Ixl that's really important. Because it's so important, I'm going to ask you to get to a 100 on this Ixl because I really need to make sure that you know you have angles locked down and you know exactly how to complete them. So this wraps up our video on angles. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.